Hello and welcome to the 2020 Grand River Spring Forum Shed Talks. My name is Eileen Boekestein and I am the Environmental Education Coordinator here at LGROW. I'm pleased to introduce our next Shed Talk titled Growing Partnerships, Building Urban Forestry Capacity in the Watershed. This talk comes to you from Lee Mueller. Lee is a market manager with Davey Resource Group. He's a certified arborist, a certified forester, and he holds forestry degrees from Michigan State University. Lee has been a staff or a board member for a variety of community initiatives dedicated to forestry and parks. Lee and Davey Resource Group have been great partners to LGROW on a number of community and urban forestry projects, as you'll hear in his presentation today. After his presentation, hang on, and I will give you just one example of how the work he's been doing in our watershed has inspired even further efforts to increase tree canopy and help reduce stormwater runoff on school properties. Thanks so much for your presentation, Lee. We hope you all enjoy.
Hello, I'm Lee Mueller. I'm a market manager with Davey Resource Group. We offer ecological restoration, environmental consulting, and urban forestry services to a wide range of government, institution, and private clients. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a partnership that I've had for a number of years with Relief Michigan and the Michigan DNR to develop capacity in small local communities for urban forest management. Really recently we worked in the Lower Grand River Watershed with the Grand Valley Metro Council and Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds to implement this project with 4 communities in that watershed. Specifically, this project is designed to provide a new urban forest management tool to small communities with limited capacity in urban forestry, talk to them about what the tool means and how it can be used, and then actually use the tool with them to affect change on the ground, in this case, tree planting. Our conversations with local communities always begin with a recognition that trees have benefits and trees therefore have value. There's been a rich body of research over the last couple of decades that have essentially quantified the environmental benefits that trees and populations of trees can provide, and then have actually ascribed values to those benefits. So this is actually a screenshot from a report in Grand Rapids where they've said that Grand Rapids' current level of tree canopy provides about $2.6 million of benefits each year. This is based on a model that's enshrined in the iTrees suite of software developed by the U.S. Forest Service and Davey Institute that basically looks at what are the ecosystem benefits a population of trees are expected to provide. Gallons of stormwater captured in the average storm, the air quality improvement through capturing of particulate matter, reduction of carbon monoxide, the sequestration of carbon. Trees are living things that grow to sequester carbon, and then looks for alternative technologies or methods to achieve that same value. So in other words, if these trees did not exist, a community or a city would have to pay X amount of dollars to achieve the same level of environmental benefits. So no one's handing a city a check for their trees and the benefits they provide, but certainly without those trees, communities would experience a level of environmental concerns that might have a cost associated with them. So regardless, this is information we use to sort of set up why trees are important. And specifically, we want to help make the connection for local communities between trees and stormwater. It's well established that watershed health is linked to the amount of forest in the watershed and the distribution of that forest. Increases in tree cover and tree size reduce total runoff and peak runoff rates. If you think about it, if you go to stand underneath a tree at the beginning of a rainstorm, you'll stay dry compared to if you were standing out in where there's open sky. The trees are capturing a large amount of water on their leaf surfaces and slowing how quickly that water reaches the ground. This essentially, flattens the curve in a watershed management sense. And so we understand that the effects of this is greatest when the urban trees are large and well established and when there's a lot of trees well established throughout a community. And so part of our conversation with local communities through this project is helping to understand those connections, understand how, while trees are pretty, they can also be managed for a purpose. This project so far has occurred or is occurring in 4 different watersheds around Michigan. We first started with the Saginaw Bay watershed as sort of a pilot program, and then moved to work with 5 different communities in the Grand Traverse watershed. Recently, we've just completed work with 4 communities in the Lower Grand River watershed, and then we're in the process of starting another iteration of this project in the St. Joe River watershed on both sides of the Michigan-Indiana border. But today, I'm mostly going to talk about our experience with the Lower Grand River. Just giving you an idea of what we do and how we do it. Essentially, our partnership between Relief Michigan, the Michigan DNR, Davey Resource Group, and then a local partner, in this case, the Lower Grand River Organization Watershed, brings to the table forestry expertise, time. We can help marshal volunteer. We bring some funds. We have the ability to leverage GIS and geospatial technology, relationships and partnerships, and we do some education and outreach. And through a series of sort of designed approaches to our program, we're delivering data to local communities to make decisions on tree planting and tree maintenance that then ultimately long-term we're hoping leads to increased tree canopy within the watershed, which helps decrease stormwater runoff and helps propel local momentum in community forestry efforts. In the Lower Grand River watershed, we work directly with 4 communities. These communities were selected based on, one, their size. We had a limited budget, so we needed to work with communities of a certain size. We worked with communities that had demonstrated to some degree some interest in trees, either having previously worked with Relief Michigan or having some local momentum on the ground. And then we also worked with communities that LGROW and the Grand Valley Metro Council have previous experience working with on a variety of other environmental initiatives. So the communities in this case were Ferrysburg, Sparta, Granville, and Hudsonville. And it's interesting to point out too that I think these communities represent an interesting cross-section of the West Michigan area. Ferrysburg is a lakeshore community, Sparta is relatively rural, Hudsonville is currently developing and is formerly and currently agricultural community, and then Granville is certainly more of a direct suburb of the city of Grand Rapids. The first thing we do with our communities is take satellite data and create a land cover assessment. The land cover assessment basically takes imagery that we have available to us, usually within the last year or so, feeds it into a software program, and then classifies where are there trees, where is there impervious surfaces like building and streets, where is there pervious surfaces like grass and low-lying vegetation, bare soil, and water. We're then provided essentially a map that shows the distribution of these different land cover types. And we can begin to look at, okay, where are there trees? Where are there not trees? Why aren't there trees there? Are trees equally distributed? Are they not equally distributed? What does this mean for urban forest management? Importantly, we can also use the tree canopy side of this data to then estimate the ecosystem benefits in a particular community. So here you'll see the ecosystem benefits estimated for Hudsonville's urban forest. And so on an annualized basis, these are the benefits that Hudsonville receives in air quality, carbon sequestration, stormwater reduction, and those have a estimated value based on how the cost of other technologies to provide similar benefits. Interestingly, when we're done with this approach, each community is provided a metric, what's its total tree canopy percentage? What percentage of its land cover, if you flew over the community and looked down, is covered by trees? And so you'll see here that we have a wide range of different levels in the communities we worked with. Ferrysburg has the greatest tree canopy at 39%. Now, Ferrysburg is a community, largely built within a forested ecosystem with large amounts of intact land there, which contributes to a higher level of tree canopy. On the other hand, Hudsonville has the lowest tree canopy at 21%. However, Hudsonville has a lot of agricultural land that is slowly developing, and as that land develops, people tend to plant trees in their yards, which is likely going to lead to increased tree canopy over time. So in short, while one has high canopy, one has Ferrysburg has the opportunity maybe to lose some of that canopy if some of those intact forest parcels become something else. Whereas Hudsonville, on the other hand, as agricultural land becomes residences, and those residential homeowners plant trees is likely to lead to increased tree canopy. So it's just really interesting to compare and contrast these different communities and look at the data that we have. One of the really cool things we developed through this process is we take the land cover assessment, and then we basically identify all the possible planting locations in a community. And this is where we take a map of the community, then we take out anything that's already a tree. We take out anything that's like pavement or building, because it's not likely you're just going to mow down a building and put up a tree. We take out the water. Trees don't survive very well if you plant them in a lake. And then we're left with essentially the bare soil and the pervious surfaces, grass and low-lying vegetation. Some of those we remove because you're probably not going to plant a tree in the middle of a baseball diamond. You're probably not going to plant a tree in the middle of a golf course putting green. So there's a number of other things we try to eliminate. What you're left with is everywhere that could possibly have a tree. By no means do we ever say you should put a tree in all these locations, but it's interesting to at least look at where trees could go. We then create sort of a prioritization matrix of where could trees be planted that they would have the greatest impact on stormwater quantity and quality. This is created by pulling in soils data, looking at proximity of these planting locations to other trees or to water bodies or impervious surfaces and so on and so forth. And so you generate a map like this where trees planted in the red locations would likely have the greatest impact on stormwater management, whereas trees planted in the purple locations, well, you could still plant a tree there and a tree would still be good, but would have lesser impact on stormwater management. So for Ferrisburgh, which is here, that allows us to have a conversation about often these lead to dense residential areas or core commercial districts, is where there is a very low level of pervious surfaces or tree canopy. There's a lot of impervious surfaces that water cannot infiltrate, and that's where often trees could best be planted. Trees planted where they cover impervious surfaces will help capture some water and reduce it before it hits the pavement and runs off into the storm systems. So a lot of our conversations with the communities revolve around this map, and this is where once this map is generated, Relief Michigan starts to talk individually with local communities about where they could plant trees and how Relief Michigan will work with them to plant trees in these locations to maximize the benefit of those trees to stormwater management. We also try to make sure that the communities have the data in their hands as much as possible. The first iteration of this project we did in the Saginaw Bay watershed, we handed a paper report to each community. And we learned that that probably wasn't the best way to put the data and the information in their hands. So now we write a web-based report, and this web-based report is available online to both the public and the community leadership. It has a lot of information about our approach, our process, our findings, recommendations to the local communities, and so we certainly did this for Ferrisburgh, Granville, Hudsonville, and Sparta as well. There's a link at the bottom here that will be at the end of this presentation as well, in case you wish to go check this out yourself. But this report also links to a GIS story map, where we have all of the data uploaded so that the local communities or interested public can zoom in, look at the information, turn on and off the land cover assessment, turn on and off the various prioritized planting locations, and take a look at the data for their community. Through working on this project with other communities in other areas of the state, we learned that they don't often have local capacity to manage GIS data. And so we created these story maps as a way to try to make it a little bit easier for them to make use of these data long term, as opposed to us just handing them a bunch of shapefiles. So once all the data are created, we try to turn these results into local action on the ground and develop local capacity to long-term manage the urban forest. And this is done through a variety of ways. One, Relief Michigan, Davey, and local partners will go to each local community and have a meeting, generally in a public format, but sometimes just sort of a cabinet meeting, where we talk about the urban tree canopy assessment, the results, and what we think it means to their community. Relief Michigan then takes those data and those maps and works hand in hand with a local community and the person responsible for trees or tree planting to identify locations where trees could be planted and to actually work towards a tree planting. The tree planting is done with volunteers. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Once the tree planting is done, Relief Michigan provides follow-up support to each community and guidance post-planting. They do several visits after the planting to help ensure the trees are being maintained properly, to just offer their expertise and assistance, and to just check in and make sure the communities are feeling good about the entire process. When this is all done, our hope is that the local communities are more comfortable with tree planting and using the urban forestry analyses to impact the way that they think and look at trees on the ground. The tree planting in particular is pretty neat. Relief Michigan has a great model for working with communities on tree planting. They've been doing it since the 80s. And essentially they have a tree planting in a box. Relief Michigan provides a forester. Relief Michigan helps the local community with the planning of a tree planting, figuring out where trees can be planted, assessing different locations, putting together the proper species list. Relief Michigan then works with nurseries to order trees and have those trees delivered. When the planting date comes, Relief Michigan is on site to ensure the trees are unloaded and placed appropriately. Relief Michigan provides volunteer training and oversight. Here's a planting demonstration in Grandville, where specifically the Relief Michigan Forester and Relief Michigan volunteers help everyone understand how to plant a tree. They plant a tree in front of them first, and then once all the volunteers go out to plant the trees, the Relief Michigan volunteers and forester will be working through the various volunteers to make sure all trees are being planted correctly. Once it's all said and done, Relief Michigan again revisits with the community for post-planting assessments, follow-up maintenance, and just to make sure everything is continuing appropriately. The community, in turn, participates. They're a full participant in this process. They are a full participant in planning the planting because that's sort of the goal, that we impart on them some knowledge and that they get more comfortable with tree planting and using the data we created to figure out where and how to plant trees. The local community has to recruit the volunteers for the planting. The local community pre-digs the holes, and they also help unload the trees. And then lastly, the local community needs to maintain the trees once the planting is done. So again, the idea being Relief Michigan comes in and provides a bunch of expertise and assistance, and the community helps and participates. And through that process, we create a strong understanding of the approach and tree planting. They gain new networks with Relief Michigan, and then hopefully in having 4 communities in the watershed participate in this same project, those different communities also create a network among each other. So long-term impact on this project, again, from beginning to end, where we create an urban tree canopy assessment, estimate ecosystem benefits, and identify prioritized planting locations. We then walk into the community and talk to them about what we did, what it means, and what they can do about it. And then Relief Michigan helps them do something about it by planting trees and working hand in hand with the community. This leads, hopefully, to additional tree planting. Hopefully, it leads to some understanding of the importance of urban forest and leads the community to develop additional initiatives or programs to positively impact their urban and community forest. And then also we're hoping that by engaging a number of communities all at one time in one watershed, that we're leading to some inter-community networking so that they can help each other on urban forestry issues over time. And as we look towards the future, this hopefully results in more tree canopy within that watershed to capture and maintain more stormwater. I will say that we've been doing this for several years, and it's interesting watching the development of different communities that have participated with this. Some of them, there's been really no direct change in how they manage urban forests on the ground or think about watershed. Others, we have seen them go for tree planting grants. Others have gone for other stormwater initiatives or green infrastructure initiatives, partly as a result of having these conversations and making the connection between stormwater and the watershed and how they can manage that in their community. So it's been a wide range of different processes, and I will say that between the 4 communities we worked with in the Lower Grand River, there's a lot of excitement around trees and a couple of them that I think will lead to long-term impact in urban forestry. So again, my name is Lee Mueller. I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk to you remotely and at a distance. And I did include the 2 links or web addresses here to the story map as well as the online report in case you wish to look further at the information we developed and the approach to our project. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you at some point in the future about this.
Thanks for that presentation, Lee. As I mentioned in the introduction, our partnership with Davey and with Relief in this project inspired us to continue working to increase tree canopy in our watershed, while also increasing the capacity of our partners to effectively manage stormwater on the properties they manage. One area we've seen a big need for that is on school campuses. So we recently received funding from the U.S. Forest Service through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative for our Grand River Green Schools project. And in this project, we're partnering with schools throughout the watershed to plant trees and to install other green infrastructure practices on school property in order to reduce stormwater runoff and improve nearby water quality. We're also working closely with school facilities staff to make sure that they understand the best ways to install and maintain these practices in the long run. We are beginning this project by partnering with 5 schools you can see here: Allendale Middle School, Forest Hills Public Schools, the Kent Intermediate School District campus, Crestwood Elementary, and Canonsburg Elementary. And we'll be adding additional school properties to this project as we move forward. With support from our partners on this project at Trout Unlimited, Davey Resource Group, Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, ITC, Cannon Township, and the Department of Natural Resources, we will be planting 300 trees, installing a rain garden, a bioswale, and planting hundreds of native plants on these school properties. Since school campuses are generally too small to perform the level of in-depth urban tree canopy assessment that Lee described in his presentation, we've been working on a smaller and more individualized scale using tools like the iTree species and iTree design tools online to identify the best species and sites for planting at each school property in order to maximize our impact on those sites. This past semester, Lee actually worked with a class, and so did I, at Grand Valley State University in the Introduction to Environmental and Sustainability Studies program with Dr. Amanda Boudet. And these students analyzed some of our school properties and gave us recommendations on species and locations for planting in each site. Here's one example of their work on the Kent ISD campus, where we are hoping to hold one of our first planting events. Each school site is different, and we have been really pleased with how the GVSU students have helped us to think about the best practices and the best species for each individual location. So here you can see some of the work they did to identify issues and some solutions on the Allendale Middle School campus. And if you'd like to see more of their work on this project, you can check out the Environmental and Sustainability Studies Winter 2020 Sustainability Showcase, available online at this link. This is from class ENS 201. So we look forward to continuing to work on this project, and hopefully we'll have more to share with you next year at the 18th Annual Grand River Spring Forum. Thanks so much. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. And thanks again to all of our wonderful sponsors who make the Spring Forum possible.